Good evening, fellow Earth people. Tonight, I would like to take you on a trip with our minds. I would like to start this off by saying let's all relax. You gentlemen can loosen your ties if you like. Some of you may end up going to sleep. Of course, I don't think with the time limitation you will be too deep asleep. I don't want you to listen intently to what I have to say. I want you to feel, to absorb. I don't want you to think. I would like you in a state of alert relaxation. I want you to start by just relaxing in your chairs and feel your consciousness. Feel where you are. I think most will find your self-awareness somewhere up here in the cranium. That place you say, I am. That's me. That's where I dwell. That's where your center of awareness is. Some of you may find it other places. If so, let's put it in our heads. And think about it for a moment. Just be aware of it, feel of it. Because we're going to do something a little unique this evening. This evening, we are going to consider ourselves members of the crew of Spaceship Earth. First of all, what is it like to be a crewman on a spacecraft? What is necessary? What is necessary is to understand, have an empathy with, and function as a close-knit elite team. You have to anticipate, trust, love the other members of that team. Tonight, we're going to be members of the crew of Spaceship Earth. I want you to abandon, for the moment, your roles as mothers, fathers, businessmen, professional people. Allow that to be your skill that you will utilize in your duties as a member of the crew of Spaceship Earth. Your primary duty, your primary responsibility, all of your actions should be oriented towards your duties as a crewman of this spaceship. Now that we've established our role and what it is we're going to do, we need to get into a setting that will allow us the proper perspective. We're now at a crew meeting of the members of the crew of Spacecraft Earth. Now, you know there's a technique that's being used widely in industry, in commerce, and elsewhere in this country. When decisions have to be made, the executives of the organization find themselves a nice retreat. They take their key people. They get away for a week or 10 days or 3 days or whenever in a very relaxed, beautiful setting. They relax their minds. They have a fellowship together, and they consider the problems that they have to work with. Tonight, we're going to use a technique of simulation to get ourselves into such an environment. We're going to do so because we need to put the problems of our spacecraft into perspective. We need to relax, get away from it, take a different view. And we're going to do that by simulation with our minds. We're going to retreat into space. I would like for you now, in this relaxed, alert condition that I hope that you're in, to, with your minds, follow me into space. With your consciousness, which I hope is still in your head, we want to imagine ourselves first out of our head. We want to move up to the top of this room. We want to see the people. Imagine the people in this room Down below you, you can see this room from the vantage point of the top of the room. When you're comfortable with that, let's move right on out. Let's move right out above the city of Los Angeles. We can see the dark Pacific out to our west. We can see the lights of the city. We can see the darkness of the desert stretching into Arizona out to the east. Let us keep moving ourselves now from the perspective of just above the city up to the perspective that we might have in a high-flying aircraft. Picture that in your minds. When you have that, move with me out to the edge of space. At that point, you start to see the curve of the horizon. And we will move around the Earth a little bit until we can see the terminator, or we can see the light shining along the horizon. We see the different bands of blue stretching into a deep black out on the edge of space. Let us now take our minds and move deeper into space. We'll put the sun at our backs as we move into space, and we'll see that curved horizon start to get more curved and more curved as we move away. And suddenly, where we only saw a curve of a horizon before, we're now beginning to see almost the entire blue and white ball of Earth. Peeking through the clouds, through the atmosphere, we see some green of continents. We see some reddish-brown of deserts. We see the deep blue of the ocean. And as we get further away, however, those things fade, and all you see is a blue and white planet. Let's move right on out into space until that blue and white planet, pictures you may have seen from this vantage point, none of those pictures will do it justice. A magnificent blue planet. Let us now move on out until we can see the planet about the size of a baseball held at arm's length, till it's about twice the size of the full moon that you can see. What do we see? We see this magnificent little jewel, blue, white, sometimes with a wisp of other colors as the continents and the deserts poke through. We see it floating in an immense black velvet sky, totally black. We see more stars around it than we've ever seen before. We feel the sun at our back. We don't see the sun. And looking away from the sun, there's the blackest black you've ever seen. And we see this little ball suspended in this velvet black sky. A view like you've never seen before. What do we sense? What do we feel about it? We suddenly feel an awe. We feel an overwhelming sense of harmonious functioning of the universe. We suddenly recognize the insignificance of that little planet, that in the vastness of the universe, it is only a pebble, and that in the universe, there must be many more, perhaps thousands, perhaps millions, of like little planets where intelligent life carries on its chore of living. We sense this, we feel it, we suddenly feel a harmonious relationship with the universe, with that planet, but especially we have now arrived at a point where we can put that planet in perspective. We see how beautiful, how magnificent, how harmonious, how peaceful that little planet looks. That's the way we feel about it. We see what it could be, floating in its majestic black velvet space. But now let us get to the problems of the planet. That's what we're here for. to get a new perspective. What is the condition of the spacecraft planet Earth? And what is the condition of its crew? Well, we can name a few. Our population is increasing at an unprecedented rate. The crew is magnifying itself or multiplying itself rapidly. We're using the natural resources. In spacecraft terminology, we call them consumables, at a very alarming rate. And because of that use of power, that use of resources, the waste disposal system of the spacecraft is not adequate. It's starting to break down. The crew is magnifying itself or multiplying itself rapidly. We're using the natural resources. In spacecraft terminology, we call them consumables, at a very alarming rate. And because of that use of power, that use of resources, the waste disposal system of the spacecraft is not adequate. It's starting to break down. Garbage is starting to pile up. The atmosphere is starting to become foul. The waters of the planet are starting to be fouled. The crew is grumbling and quarreling. Mutiny threatened. People are losing their identity. The technological genius of the crew has invented weaponry capable of immense destruction, presumably for the protection of the people on the crew, but sometimes we wonder. Those are the sorts of problems the spacecraft planet Earth is facing. And the crew, and we as part of that crew, must find a way to solve them. Now let us be pragmatic for a moment. The Earth is a spacecraft, and the integrity of that spacecraft is paramount if the crew is to survive. These things I've talked about as problems become very pressing problems. The most brilliant thinkers on this crew feel that the spacecraft and its crew do not have too long a lifetime unless some of these problems are solved, unless we change the trend of activity on planet Earth that we have seen over the last few years. Well, now, generally, it's the responsibility of the captain of a spacecraft to deal with these sorts of problems, to find the answers to disharmony, to mechanical problems on the spacecraft. It's his problem to provide the solutions and to provide guidance for the crew. From our perspective in space, we start wondering about the captain. Who is the captain? But I assure you, from our perspective, you no longer have a doubt. As we view the Earth from this perspective, we have an overwhelming awareness that there is a plan, that there is a design, that the universe is not a chaotic, stochastic process that has come together by the immutable laws of chance. Not at all. You have an overwhelming sense of the divine.
This program is continued on the reverse side of this cassette. Stop your player and turn the cassette to side 2.
In the words of astronaut Jim Irwin, he sensed or felt the presence of God upon the moon. I think I would state it differently. Although I totally agree with and totally understand what Jim is saying. I would say there is a consciousness and an intelligence, a will behind the functioning of the universe. Certainly, this universe is not a random, chaotic place. From our viewpoint, here in space, looking at our small planet, one gains an overwhelming sense of unity, of direction, of purpose, of beauty, of harmony, that could be on this planet. One feels deeply, at the very deep gut level, these things. You have a knowingness that there is a direction and purpose to the universe. But some of our crew of this spacecraft say, hold on there, wait just a minute. We are a scientific, objective people. These feelings, these intuitions, these ideas of knowing aren't to be trusted. How can you say, just because you say, there is a purpose to the universe? How can you say there is a presence of God? My reply to this is that all the astronauts I know are pretty pragmatic, engineering-oriented, scientific-oriented group of people. They are objective. They've been trained in objectivity for 30 to 40 years, most of us. And almost to a man, something has happened. They have had a change in their consciousness process. There has been a sensing of a greater purpose. There has been, in my words, an instant global consciousness when one views planet Earth from this perspective. There is something happening to the consciousness of man. This is really nothing new. Ancient teachers, mystic sages, Buddha, Lao Tse, Christ, Krishna, all have discovered the state of consciousness where one senses truths about the universe, where one starts to attune to the universality, to the harmonious functioning of the universe. So what's new? What have we done in our pragmatic, objective Western technology to destroy our belief, our knowingness of these processes? Yes, we are pragmatists. We're materialist. We have a materialist view of cosmology. We don't trust our subjective feelings. This thing called consciousness, intuition, subjective experience, hunch, gut feel, awareness, these things are just a little bit suspect in our modern society. Do we have some tangible, objective means of knowing that these ideas about consciousness are not all a hallucination? Is there a way that we can check these subjective impressions that many of us have felt, and that many of you have felt, and that many of people throughout the ages have felt? I submit to you that there is. A very few far-sighted people, scientists, skilled in objective techniques, have gone into the laboratory and have shown that the consciousness of man can do things science has said cannot happen. They have satisfied themselves, if not yet the entire scientific community, that, for example, telepathy is a real phenomenon, that psychokinesis is a real phenomenon, that spiritual healing is a real phenomenon. I know, some of my colleagues know because they've seen these things demonstrated, that most individuals on the crew of this spacecraft have a telepathic ability. They can, under certain environmental conditions, share thoughts with one another non-verbally at a distance. We have seen that certain very special people, and perhaps the ability is latent in all of us, we think it is, that the consciousness of man has an energy available to it that has control over matter, that can move matter, that can change matter. Our historical records tell us about it, but we've chosen to ignore them. In modern days, we have seen these things in the laboratory. We know that they're true. And certainly the people in this audience are not unfamiliar with the ability of the mind of man to heal the body of another individual. You have seen this in your practicing, in your work. I have seen it under controlled conditions. I have seen it with ordinary people. I've seen it with very gifted people. I know it is real and genuine. But we have yet to convince the majority of objective, materialist, reductionist thinking scientists that these things are real. We can sum it up, however, that the evidence points to the fact there is an energy available to the consciousness, to the mind of man, that the ancient sages and mystics have talked about in pre-scientific terms. They have utilized it. They have tried to tell us about it. We don't really understand it. We don't quite know how to handle it yet. We can't fit it into our body of science at this point. And we in our sophisticated technological world have either ignored it or totally misunderstood the energy of consciousness at this point in the history of mankind. And perhaps we have misunderstood it to our peril. We, the crewmen, the Spaceship Earth, are attempting to solve the ever-mounting problems and crises of our planet, utilizing only a tiny portion of the consciousness that is available to us. We don't use our minds. We don't use the physiological portion we call the brain properly. We don't know how. We have thrown away much of the ancient knowledge that was available to us. We have not discovered or rediscovered how to use the energy of consciousness that apparently has always been available to living systems. We asked earlier about the captain of Spacecraft Earth. And I said, there is a captain. There is a plan. There is a consciousness available to man through the proper utilization of our minds that can allow the crew of this planet to begin to function as a crew. But the problem of bringing a harmonious functioning to planet Earth can never be solved if the crew continues to use only an insignificant portion of its consciousness, if it continues to work its way along the materialistic, reductionist path of thinking that has become prevalent in Western society over the last 300 years. It's simply not going to happen. In my opinion, the answers to the ills and misfortunes besetting the inhabitants of this planet can be solved with a change of consciousness, with an understanding of consciousness, with a working toward the utilization of this primordial energy that seems to be available to living systems that we have never utilized before. Whether we utilize it in healing, which is the greatest gift of all, or the greatest utilization of all, or whether we utilize it in some of the other aspects that are available to us, these things are important for our understanding. They're important to help mankind as crewmen, as brothers, on this tiny little spacecraft that we inhabit. And now, since the hour is late, and I must shorten my remarks, and since I don't want any of the members of this crew to remain with their consciousness in space, I would like all of you to make sure that you're comfortably settled back in your heads in this room, in the Ambassador Hotel. rather than remain gazing at the planet from 240,000 miles. You know, it could happen. But now that we're all back here, I would like to sum up my remarks very briefly with just a couple of sentences. I think the way we do this, the way we achieve the things I have been talking about in a Western pragmatic scientific society, we start doing research in consciousness. We start trying to understand what this energy that man has available to him that he has not fully tapped. We try to understand what it is using the best tools of objective science that we know have available to us, and the best minds that can use their intuition, their subjective processes available to us, combine these. We start to bring together the two modalities of cognizing the universe: the objective modality of Western science, the subjective modality that all man has available to him, the modality that has been available to the enlightened teachers and sages for thousands of years. We will learn a lot from taking their ideas and putting them into Western terms, and then trying with our Western objective technology to see where that takes us. But I think the thing that we need to know best as individuals, whether we are scientists or not, we must sum up these ideas with the following words. You must seek to know thyself. You must continue the search for ultimate consciousness, or God, if you will. And most of all, with Spacecraft Earth, you must serve each other. That is, serve humanity. I thank you for your time.